When you think about being a great conversationalist, um, the first thing that probably pops into your head is having amazing stories to tell.
Yeah, or like knowing cool facts, being quick with a clever line, right?
Exactly. It
Yeah.
feels like it's all about what you say, your performance.
That's absolutely the common assumption. We tend to focus on, our own contributions, how interesting we sound.
But the source material we're diving into today, it completely flips that idea on its head.
It really does.
It suggests that being a truly great conversationalist
Yeah.
might have almost nothing to do with talking at all.
It's a fascinating paradox, isn't it? It comes from these excerpts from a chapter called An Easy Way to Become a Good Conversationalist.
Okay, so our mission in this deep dive is to really unpack these ideas from the text
Right.
and figure out why, according to these pages, just listening might actually be the single most powerful tool you have in, like, any conversation.
And the central idea the author puts forward is, well, it's remarkably direct, maybe even a little blunt.
Oh, how so?
Basically, that most people, most of the time, are just far more interested in themselves, their own wants, their own problems, than they could ever be in you and yours.
Okay, that's direct. Let's unpack that. There's a classic anecdote in the material, right, about a bridge party.
Yes. The author's there doesn't even play bridge, apparently.
Right. And he meets this woman who finds out he's traveled a lot.
And she says something like, "Oh, Mr. So-and-so, I really want you to tell me about all the wonderful places you've visited." Sounds like an open door, right?
Totally. The perfect setup to launch into some exciting travel tales, you'd think.
You would think.
But here's where it gets, well, really interesting. They sit down. She happens to mention her own recent trip to Africa.
Okay.
And the author, instead of pivoting back, he jumps on her comment.
Yeah.
It says something like, Africa. How interesting. Always wanted to go. Telling me, did you see the big game country?
Yes.
Wow, how fortunate. I envy you. Do tell me about Africa.
So he turns it right back to her.
Completely. And the
He
result,
talks for, what was it?
45 minutes straight, nonstop, about her trip. Never once asked about where he'd been or what he'd seen.
Wow. That story just perfectly illustrates the main point, doesn't it?
It really does.
She didn't actually want to hear him. She wanted an interested listener, someone, as the text puts it, to kind of expand her ego by letting her talk about herself.
And the materials suggest this isn't like a one-off thing.
Yeah.
It's a common human tendency.
Absolutely. So if talking about yourself isn't the way, what is?
Well, the source argues that simply listening, like genuinely listening, is one of the highest compliments you can pay someone.
There's another story, right? The dinner party with the botanist.
Yes. So the author's at this dinner, seated next to a distinguished botanist, he'd never met one before, was genuinely fascinated.
Okay.
And instead of trying to, fake his way through a conversation about plants, something he knew zero about, he literally describes sitting on the edge of his chair, totally engaged, listening intently for hours as the botanist talked about exotic plants, indoor gardens, even apparently astonishing facts about potatoes.
Potatoes. Right.
Right.
He was just so genuinely interested, so captivated, he kind of ignored everyone else at the table, just rapt attention.
Which maybe isn't great dinner party etiquette, but
With the outcome.
exactly.
Yeah.
The author said basically nothing about botany or himself. He just listened.
Hmm.
But later, the botanist tells their host that the author was a most stimulating and most interesting conversationalist.
And the why is clear in the text, right? His genuine interest, that attentive listening, it made the botanist feel really heard and valued. There's that quote from Jack Woodford, "Few human beings are proof against the implied flattery of rapt attention."
That's powerful. And the author did more than just listen passively, too. He actively engaged while listening.
How so?
He was, the text says, hearty in his approbation and lavish in his praise. He told the botanist how entertained and instructed he felt, wished he had that knowledge, said he wanted to wander the fields with him.
So validating the speaker.
Yes. And he made a point to see him again, which he actually did. It wasn't fake interest, it was real. And by being genuinely interested, letting the other guy share his passion, he was seen as interesting.
Just by being a good listener and encouraging the other person. It's paradoxical.
It really is. And this idea, this principle of attentive listening, it's not just for, like, casual chats. The source shows its power in business, too.
Right. It brings in Charles W. Eliot, the former Harvard president.
Yeah, talking about successful business interviews, Eliot put it pretty simply. There is no mystery about successful business intercourse. Exclusive attention to the person who is speaking to you is very important. Nothing else is so flattering as that.
Exclusive attention. And Henry James, describing Eliot's listening style, said it wasn't just silence, it was active.
Active listening. How did he describe it?
Well, Eliot would sit erect, hands joined, thumbs kind of revolving,
Hmm.
hearing with his eyes as well as his ears, listening with his mind, really considering what was said.
So the speaker felt truly heard, like they had had his say.
Exactly, that feeling of completion.
It sounds so obvious when you lay it out like that.
It does.
Yet the text points out how rare it actually is in practice. We don't often see that level of attention.
No, we don't. Contrast that with the example from the Chicago department store. Remember that one?
Oh, yeah. The clerk who just completely alienated the customer, Mrs. Douglas.
Right, over a damaged coat bought on final sale. The clerk just wouldn't listen, kept interrupting.
Just quoting policy. Finals, final. Ugh.
Yeah, and Mrs. Douglas was ready to walk, take her business somewhere else forever.
But the department manager steps in, and what does he do differently?
He listens.
Yeah.
Listens.
Yeah.
Attentively to the whole story.
Okay.
Examines the coat, actually understands the situation that, final sale doesn't really cover damaged goods.
So he got the facts straight by listening.
Exactly. And then he offered options. Repair, replacement, or a refund.
And save the customer.
Saved a valuable relationship. Not by being clever with policy initially, but just by giving her the basic courtesy of truly hearing her out first.
And it's not just business, right? The material connects this to personal life, too. Millie Esposito's son, Robert.
Oh, yeah, that's a touching one. He told her he felt really loved because, quote, "Whenever I want to talk to you about something, you stop whatever you are doing and listen to me."
Wow. Just stopping and giving that exclusive attention, that signals importance more than anything else.
It really does. And the source also digs into how listening can actually diffuse, intense conflict and anger.
There's that wild story about the troubleshooter from the New York telephone
But
company.
yes, dealing with a customer who is just absolutely furious.
Like off the charts angry, cursing, threatening, refusing to pay, filing complaints, lawsuits.
Yeah.
The works.
Just raising hell. And the troubleshooter's approach, kind of radical in its simplicity.
Which was?
He just listened patiently. For hours, across multiple visits.
Hours. Wow.
Yeah. And he focused on saying yes and sympathizing with the customer's feelings. He even joined the guy's protest organization.
He joined it. That's next level commitment to listening. What happened?
The customer completely calmed down, softened, paid his bills, withdrew the complaints, everything just stopped.
Okay, why? What's the analysis in the source?
It suggests the customer's anger came from this deep need to feel important. First, he gained that feeling by being difficult, by complaining loudly.
Right. Negative attention is still attention.
Exactly. But when a company representative showed him that immense respect, listening intently, patiently for hours, his imagined grievances, as the text calls them, just kind of vanish.
Because the underlying need to feel important was finally met through being genuinely heard.
Precisely. That need was satisfied in a positive way.
There's another one like that, right? Julian F. Detmer.
Yes, another great example. A customer refusing to pay a disputed bill, threatening to stop buying anything ever again.
Okay, standard angry customer scenario. What did Detmer do?
He met with the customer, and crucially, he listened patiently, without interrupting even once, until the customer had vented everything.
Just let him go.
Let him finish completely. Then, instead of arguing, Detmer thanked him, sincerely, for coming all the way to Chicago to explain the problem.
Thank him.
Yeah. Framed it as super helpful feedback for the credit department. Then he told the customer he'd wipe the charge immediately, no questions asked.
Wow.
And he empathized. Said something like, "I understand how you feel if I were in his shoes." He even recommended competitor companies since the customer felt he couldn't buy from Detmer anymore.
Recommended competitors? That's bold.
Right. And then he invited him to lunch.
Okay, the result here has to be good.
It's astounding, actually. The customer didn't leave. He placed a bigger order than usual right then.
No way.
Yes. Later, he found the mislaid bill, paid it with huge apologies, and, get this, he eventually named his son Detmer.
Named his son after him.
Named his son Detmer, and remained a loyal friend and customer for 22 years.
All because Detmer just listened, empathized, and made him feel respected.
Exactly. It wasn't about the money or the policy. It was about acknowledging the person.
So this isn't just about smoothing things over or making sales. The text also shows listening as a path to, learning and opportunity.
Absolutely. Look at the story of Edward Bach.
Right. The poor Dutch immigrant kid. Limited schooling, starts as an office boy at 13, but becomes this hugely successful magazine editor.
How did he pull that off? How did he educate himself?
He saved his tiny earnings to buy an encyclopedia of American biography, read about famous people.
And then applied this principle we're talking about. He wrote to them.
Yeah, asking questions about them, especially their childhoods. He was basically listening through letters.
And he got replies from incredible people. General James Garfield, who became president, wrote back about being a canal tow boy.
General Grant drew him a map he asked for. And when Brock was only 14, Grant invited him to dinner and spent the whole evening talking to him.
Amazing. He corresponded with Emerson, Holmes, Longfellow,
Mrs. Lincoln, Jefferson Davis.
all these huge figures. And during his vacations, he'd actually go visit many of them and was welcomed as a guest.
Because he showed genuine interest in them.
Right. And the material really emphasizes that this whole experience gave him confidence, vision, ambition. It was made possible, quote, solely by the application of the principles we are discussing here.
Just by being interested in encouraging others to talk about themselves.
It's powerful stuff. And Isaac F. Marcusson, that journalist who interviewed hundreds of famous people, he's quoted saying, many people fail in conversation because they're too busy thinking about what they're going to say next.
They don't actually listen.
No. And he adds that important people especially prefer good listeners, but that this ability, listening well, is rarer than almost any other good trait.
Well,
yeah,
rarer than almost any other good trait. And it's not just the important people, right? There's that Reader's Digest quote.
Oh, yeah, the poignant one. Many persons call a doctor when all they want is an audience.
Oof, that hits home. Sometimes people just need to be heard.
Exactly. Like the story about Abraham Lincoln during the Civil War. Huge pressure, right?
Immense.
He asks an old friend to come visit him in Washington. Not for advice, though.
No. Why then?
So Lincoln could just talk at him for hours about the Emancipation Proclamation, laying out arguments, reading letters, just thinking aloud. He didn't ask the friend's opinion at all.
He just needed a listener, a friendly, sympathetic ear.
Yes. To unburden himself, clarify his own thoughts. And the text says this is often what people in trouble need most. Or irritated customers, unhappy employees, hurt friends.
Not solutions necessarily, just to be heard.
To be truly heard by someone who seems to care, or at least tries to understand.
Sigmund Freud is mentioned too, isn't he, as a great listener?
Yes, the material describes him through someone who met him, notes his concentrated attention.
Not like a Sarah, though.
No. Mild eyes, low, kind voice, few gestures. But what really stood out was his appreciation of what I said, even when I said it badly, was extraordinary.
So the speaker felt profoundly listened to, completely heard.
Exactly, that deep sense of being understood.
Okay, so we've seen the incredible power of listening. What's the flip side? The text is pretty clear about what not to do, right?
Oh, yeah. It gives a pretty stark recipe for making sure people shun you, laugh behind your back, even despise you.
Which is?
Never listen for long, talk incessantly about yourself, and constantly interrupt people.
Sounds familiar sometimes, unfortunately.
Doesn't it? The text calls these people bores, says they're intoxicated with their own egos, drunk with a sense of their own importance.
Ouch. There's that quote from Dr. Nicholas Murray Butler, too, the Columbia president.
Right. He said people who only talk about themselves only think about themselves. And he considers them hopelessly uneducated.
Hopelessly uneducated, no matter how much factual knowledge they have.
Yeah. Because they lack that fundamental understanding of other people.
So, bringing it back to the practical takeaway, the core idea from these pages is what?
If you want people to see you as a good conversationalist, first, you got to be an attentive listener.
And if you want to be interesting,
be genuinely interested. That's the most reliable path.
The actionable steps seem almost too simple. Ask questions the other person will enjoy answering.
Right. Encourage them sincerely to talk about themselves, their experiences, their accomplishments.
And always remember that fundamental truth the text keeps hammering home.
That people are just 100 times, maybe 1,000 times more interested in themselves and their own stuff than in you and yours.
Yeah, those analogies are vivid. Your own toothache matters more than a famine killing millions far away.
Or a boil on your neck interests you more than a 40 earthquake somewhere else. It sounds harsh, maybe, but
it's probably true for most of us, isn't it? And understanding that really shifts how you approach connecting with people.
It does. So the simple, powerful secret from these pages isn't about being brilliant yourself.
No, it's about cultivating genuine interest in others, letting them share.
Be a genuinely attentive listener. Encourage others to talk about themselves, and you unlock so much potential.
And it's not just about being liked, is it? We saw in the stories it helps you understand, solve problems, learn things.
Build real connections in business, family, friendships, everywhere.
So here's a thought then. If listening is this powerful sought, I mean, saving businesses, helping immigrants meet presidents, and yet the texts say it's incredibly rare.
One of the rarest good traits.
Right. Then what opportunities are we missing? Like every single day, just because we're too busy thinking about what we want to say next.
Instead of truly actively hearing the person right in front of us.
How might really committing to this one skill, putting genuine interest in active listening first, how might that change your very next conversation?